outlook on what that means for you if you're an entrepreneur. If you are not an entrepreneur, chime out. Harry Potter's available. There's a million other things available. If you are an entrepreneur, let's dive into what this means for you. So, what caused the government shutdown? Frankly, what caused the government shutdown was the Republicans used leverage in government shutdowns previously throughout the Biden administration. The leverage of the threatening shutdown they were able to use to kind of exact some power out of the circumstances. I think there's a lot of Democrat animosity around that situation, okay? That being said, I think they effectively trained the Democrats that that's the only way that they're going to get any leverage. Trump has had in his last, 9 months, 10 months now, 11 months? What are we in? He's had a tremendous amount of leverage. He's had a tremendous amount of things that he's gotten done, and they've been going through government layoffs for the entire year. So the shutdown was not the first time that we've seen government layoffs. We started with Doge. There's been a tremendous amount of things going on this whole year, and what that's really created was a party that is in peril. They lost the election dynamically, and the Democrats are trying to reestablish themselves. So that's what I believe caused it. And the reason I say that is they got nothing out of it. They shut the government down. They didn't give the votes necessary to reopen the government. And then here we are, with the longest government shutdown in history, and there's no gains. There's very little Democrat gains. What are they getting? They're getting back pay for people that they would have gotten back pay for anyway. That's not something any congressman or senator, it's such a small number, that no congressman or senator was going to vote against that. So they're reopening the government, and what they say they're doing it for is the opportunity to vote in a House and Senate where they don't have a majority. So if you're reopening the government just to do a vote that you're going to lose anyway, what was the point of the shutdown? And that's where we start kind of looking at where are they bad on both sides, okay? So, and I want to hit this in a couple ways. What caused it? And I think the Democrats have had very little power. They had so much power overreach during the Biden administration that they lost power, and Trump has done a ton of stuff in the last year that has triggered them, frustrated, showed that they still have some muscle. The other side of that is the Democrat Party now is seated out of New York. And New York is a little more liberal than most of kind of the moderate Democrats that we know from everywhere else in the country. So, when we're talking Schumer, Jeffries, AOC, these are New York politicians. They just elected a Democratic socialist, very similar to a Bernie Sanders type, only younger and more handsome, called Mamdani. And this is a guy who's got plans that, I don't see how they're going to work, but either way, regardless of your thoughts on him, this is the party in power in New York, which is the party that's kind of stepped up to take control of the Democratic left. When you see a party that's going through, let's call it an identity crisis, they have to find a way to exact some level of power to maintain relevance, especially coming in to the midterms. Now, there's an argument that the Democrats won a lot of ground in this recent, gubernatorial election, but those were all left-wing states. These are states where the likelihood that they were going to go Democrat or stay Democrat was pretty high. Nobody expected a Republican in New York, right? So they say they won a major election. I don't know that they did. I don't know that that's an indicator that this shutdown actually helped them there. And then the fact that their party turned on them on the shutdown, it sort of shifts everything in the directions of the Republicans might have had it right. And even if they didn't have it right, they're going to probably win the narrative game on this one. Even Jon Stewart this morning, I went and watched Jon Stewart, and he was blowing up the Democrats. He was like, you guys have basically lost ground. And I wish I was as funny as Jon Stewart. You guys should go watch that. But when the left-wing comedians are going against the left-wing party, there's a massive failure there. So, now, what caused it? What was it about? Honestly, just Democratic leverage showing that they could. What's going to be the result? Well, I think a lot of people were shocked at how undynamic this shutdown was. There was a lot of fear in the air. There was a lot of people thinking, oh, wow, this is going to blow up big. It's going to be huge. It's going to really hurt us. Did it? It hurt some, without a doubt. If you were an air traffic controller, you were under a tremendous amount of stress. If you were TSA, tremendous amount of stress. The military had some worries for a while, even though they got paid throughout it. And most of them had banks that, loaned them the money if they didn't get paid. So they didn't feel it, okay? And so was there tremendous pain? Well, yeah, for the air traffic control and the TSA, probably the biggest. For the SNAP benefits, we didn't really get to pain yet. Like maybe people didn't get their check, they're gonna wait a week. Okay, anybody can survive a week. Now, what's gonna happen? Well, I think the biggest thing that this shutdown actually caused, other than some wasted government money, other than some additional inefficiency, was pent up demand. So if you're an entrepreneur in any frame or stage of any type of business, you need to be looking for all the people that were holding on the fence in the uncertainty of the government shutdown to be jumping out. That's what we see coming. That's what we're looking at. We noticed a spike in traffic in this last 2 weeks like we have never seen. Now, I don't know if you're working in a business where you have data. Hopefully this is adding value. If it is, type in comments or whatever. If you have questions, I want to make sure that I'm answering them too. So if you guys see questions over there, Dom or Alexis, make sure that we chime them out. But if you have data that you're looking at, you can actually kind of see the ebbs and flows of the market. A sale of any product for the entrepreneurs out there, it starts like this. You get a lead, okay? That lead turns into an appointment or a communication, a conversation of some type, right? That communication conversation turns into hopefully a promise, which might be an agreement, right? You have an agreement, and then it culminates in a closing or a sale. Now, however quick this is, whether the lead walks into your department store, say you're at Dillard's and you sell them a product, right? Or whether this is a lead that comes through, Facebook and you're a realtor and you have to nurture them a little bit on Facebook and then get an appointment, show a house, or however you're going about doing it, we have seen tremendous pent-up demand across all of our businesses over the last few weeks, okay? When the government shutdown actually hit, it was interesting. There was a stall in everything. Then the troops got paid. Our businesses actually sold a lot more. When it came up to that second paycheck and there was a question mark, we kind of stabilized down. What's that mean? Sales went lower, but traffic went through the roof. So if you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a salesman, what should you be looking at right now? And honestly, guys, pent-up demand. You need to be ready for the wave. Markets are elasticity. They operate kind of like earthquakes do. You ever heard of plate tectonics? This is what drives earthquakes, right? So there's one giant plate moving around and another giant plate moving around, and they're connected, right? Like say you live in California, you understand this real well because you get the earthquakes. Well, they're not moving only at certain times. They're always moving, but they're elastic enough to stay together, right? Eventually they've moved enough to where you get this shift, boom, and that's what the shaking is. That's where you start getting this oh God, what are we gonna do? Houses falling down, buildings falling down, people freaking out. Yeah, so that's what markets do. When there is a question mark in the air of what's gonna happen? What does this mean? What could this cost? What's this gonna do to my family? People are generally not gonna come out and put more money on the line. And especially if you sell a high-end product, a vehicle, a house, high-end real estate, insurance, things like that, people are generally gonna wait on any type of product that requires a long-term commitment or financing or anything like that, or it's just a high price point. They'll always buy groceries, they'll always buy gasoline, they'll always pay their heating and electric bill, they'll make sure they're clothed, but they're not gonna buy luxuries, they're not gonna buy things that require any additional effort when there is uncertainty if they can avoid it. So, for those of you that are in those types of, we're getting some kind of messaging here. Let me make sure. I want to make sure that you guys can hear us. Yeah? No? Okay. I think, yeah. Can you guys hear us? Chime in yes if you can hear us. Somebody messaged something that they're having issues hearing the live. I want to make sure everybody can hear it. Okay, so other market factors. This is going to be more to my real estate and people that deal with financing. The Fed is expected to cut rates again, 25 basis points in December. So we will not get a cut in November, but we should get a cut in December. We are expected to see 2 more cuts before July, according to, I guess, the betting markets. I disagree with that. We had horrible jobs data. And when I say jobs data, we didn't get the BLS report because the government was shut down. But we had horrible jobs data in layoff announcements from public companies. And these don't initially hit, you're not gonna see this in ADP, you're not gonna see this in the BLS. BLS was shut down anyway. Because generally, when you have this, you're gonna get severance, okay? And so you see it when the severance ends. So these people are gonna get 90 days, 120 days, 6 months. But with the data that Amazon is laying people off and they're saying, oh, AI, this group is laying people off, oh, AI is replacing jobs. Now, I think there are cases where AI might be replacing some jobs. I think in most of these cases, you're seeing overvalued companies trying to push their value up when they're starting to get their value questioned. And one way to do that is they're releasing employees that they've found a way to be efficient enough to not need so that they can save money, make more money. And when that happens, you see the labor market come under threat. When the labor market comes under threat, what does the Fed do? They have to react by lowering interest rates. Now, the Fed has kind of this two-pronged approach to the world. They have to keep interest rates balanced to control inflation and interest rates balanced to control labor. So we want to be, frankly, low unemployment, right? So most people employed. And we want to be low inflation. Right now we're in a really interesting time. Like we just had 4 years where, I'm going to say it, I'm not Republican or Democrat, but I think a vegetable ran the country for 4 years. If you agree or disagree, I'm happy to chime in on your comments as to why I feel that way. But I voted Democrat and I voted Republican in the past. I do not think Biden did a good job. I think he was asleep at the wheel. I think he, even when he was sentient, he spent his life in the Congress and the Senate, and he believed that they were supposed to do everything. So he kind of left everything to them. We didn't see him doing what we see like Trump doing today, where the executive is running the executive branch like a CEO. We did see Obama in some cases doing that. We definitely saw Bush Sr. doing that. Reagan definitely did that. We did not see Biden doing that. He kind of kicked back. It was a vacation. He spent his life on Rehoboth Beach in Delaware, which unfortunately was not great for the country. That spiked inflation. Rates were too low too early. That kept inflation huge. They pumped tons of free government money into the market, even after we didn't need to. When COVID was, frankly, an afterthought, they dumped tons of money in. And that's the market that our new, presidency inherited. I watch the right and the left and how they talk, and it's funny because the left comes and blames the right for not having enough affordability. Well, they've had 10 months to cure what was the worst inflation in how many years? How many decades? Let's be real. You don't solve something that took 4 years to create in 1 year generally. And I think there has been a bunch of improvements to the circumstance. Now, the Fed is in a horrible position. The Fed is in a position where they see inflationary pressures. And let's look at what are inflationary pressures. War is an inflationary pressure. They see Ukraine and Russia. They see threats of war all over the world and other places. Now, I think Trump has actually done a very good job on ending wars, but the Ukraine-Russia piece, that's NATO, that's Europe, that's Russia. China is pumping money and weaponry into there. We have North Korea sending troops to fight on the ground with Russia. This is not a small war. This is a major war, and wars are dynamically inflationary because people that could be producing things to, sell you shoes or carpets or cars or any other type of vehicles are now instead producing what? Weapons, okay? Which is gonna go blow up factories that could be producing anything else. So what does that do to everything else? It drives up the cost of everything else because we stopped making all those things. We started making weapons, bullets, missiles, rockets, things for that. So we have inflationary items like war still persistent, and even though Trump says he's ended 8 wars, he's trying to end the 9th, the biggest one is the one he hasn't ended, and that's the one that causes the most inflation. Other things that are inflationary: oil, energy. Energy is what it takes to get everything everywhere. If you buy a product at any store, energy, gas, fuel, got it there. Whether it was fuel in an airplane, fuel in a truck, fuel in a train, doesn't matter. Fuel got that product there. So when energy prices go up, oil rose today, you're going to see issues with fuel. When we're going to take Russia out of the oil market, when Trump is threatening Russian oil, what do you think that's going to do to energy, guys? Trump is threatening tariffs on India and saying, if you don't stop buying Russian oil, or at least diversify, we're going to tariff you 50%. That's inflationary. Also, while we're on that subject, what's inflationary? To my Republican friends, and I love you guys, but tariffs are also inflationary. Anything that drives up the cost of anything else is inflationary. So the Fed's in this horribly precarious situation where we do have inflation that, it's fallen, but now it looks like it's about to bounce. And we're going to see inflationary pressures coming as a result of tariffs, as a result of oil rising, because we're going to put pressure on the Russian economy by blocking oil. So the Fed's looking at that and they're like, well, we can't really lower rates the way we would want to get to a balanced neutral rate. But if we don't lower rates, the economy is going to crash further, and it's not just going to be the big businesses doing layoffs, it'll be the small businesses. Now, for all my small business owners, when the big businesses are doing layoffs, this is not going to be a popular thing to say, and I'd be happy to talk it through. And if anybody wants to argue with me or debate me, and thank you for the likes and hearts, I appreciate it. When the big businesses are doing layoffs, what do you think they're doing? They're looking at their efficiencies. It's an indicator that it's time for you to do the same thing. Now, I am a true believer that the last thing you should become efficient with is your people, okay? Look at your processes, look at your lenders, vendors, trades if you have to. Look for efficiency everywhere you can before you look for your people to cut. But what they're telling you is we're coming into times that might be a little harder, at least in the short term. So you need to look at efficiencies. Now, big businesses also manipulate a little bit because they're chasing stock price gains, and they want investors to have certainty and confidence. And right now, stocks are a little bit overvalued. So, I mean, there is kind of that push and pull to it. That's why I'm not heavily in the large caps. I'm not heavily in any of the AI stocks right now. I do not think we're in a .com bust of the 2000, 2001 timeframe. I think we're in a different time. That time we had a bunch of stocks that were not making money, had no cash flow, and we were all betting on them, and of course the market crashed. This time, there's stocks that are making money, they're just overvalued. When Michael Burry came out last week and bet against everybody, I think that was noise. He bet against everybody. Right? Like, I don't know, I didn't watch this, but I think he bet against everybody. He watched the market react because, he's got a history of being right. He shorted things. When the market reacted, he probably got out of those puts. I would have gotten out of those puts. I would have bet against everybody or bet against the market, announced it publicly like he did. Like, you got to watch for the signal, not the noise, guys. The signal is those companies are making money, and the noise is Michael Burry bet against them, right? So if I'm Michael Burry, I'm going to go bet against them. And then when you all sell because you're freaking out because Michael Burry might know more than you, that's when he's going to cash in on his puts. Like, there's a reason he's still rich. He's not broke. And while there is a recession every 6, 8, 12 years, whatever the cycle bears, there's not a recession every year. And a lot of times when you see what we've been in the last 5 years, these kind of rolling recessions, the market's still been booming. We've just been in like sector recessions. Like right now, we're seeing an enormous slowdown in real estate. We're seeing real estate struggling massively, right? Why? Well, rates are still high. We're seeing people starting to get off the fence, but we're not seeing enough. Why? Rates are still high. Affordability is way out the window. We don't have it. So what do we need? Well, we need rates to come down for real estate to kind of wake back up. Sorry, I'm dealing with texts and calls. I probably should have silenced my phone here. Let me see if I can do that. Go and put this little sleep sign. There we go. Yeah, so if we're seeing real estate having these issues, and it's still in its stall, it's in the end of its stall, what does that mean for the rest of the economy? Real estate's an early actor. I think you're going to see it waking up, and I think you're going to see real estate waking up substantially right around May to September of 2026. That's the end of Jerome Powell's reign in the Fed. Jerome Powell has proved ineffective at best. I don't know that I would call him too late. I think he's very intelligent. I do not think he's a stupid guy. I think, instead of too late, we could say too hate. Jerome Powell hates Donald Trump, but Jerome Powell is not late. He's been very good on time in the market. He's been very good at keeping track of things. I think he does have Trump derangement syndrome, and I don't think he's going to do anything to help Trump. Trump wants rates lower. Jerome Powell wants, inflation lower. And we look at this when you have a president that's gone around and wagged his tongue and insulted Powell. Why is he going to go out and lower rates and make it easy? Win more flies with sugar than you do with salt, right? Honey might work better than shit. Yeah, well, Jerome Powell didn't get any of that. So it's not too late, it's too hate, I think, in that circumstance. I do think he was too late the first time when he didn't raise interest rates quick enough, but I don't think that's necessarily the circumstance here. I think he's balancing to manage his own legacy, which Trump has done everything to destroy, okay? And I think depending on what the Democrats do and don't do, which, I mean, they're caving on this shutdown, just probably gave Trump a massive upper hand. I can see where he would be coming from because, you have the federal government, which is kind of one entity, and that's the executive branch, the Supreme Court, the House, the Senate. Well, outside of the federal government, it's not really a government entity, but it is government, you got your Federal Reserve. In the last, 5 years, 10 years, the Fed chair has probably been more powerful than the president. You look at what rates do in a global economy, whew. So real estate's an early actor. We're gonna see it picking up May to September, and that's gonna be a good indication of what's coming next, okay? What's coming next is gonna be the rest of the market follows real estate. When real estate hit inflation 4 or 5 years ago, 3, 4 years ago, I guess, when we saw lumber prices doubling and tripling, you know, we were screaming about it. The rest of the world was like, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. Well, all of a sudden, the inflation comes, the real estate guys were right. What's a late indicator in the market? Government. And what do I mean by government? Well, if real estate's an early indicator and government's a late indicator in the market, these are things that you can use to time what's gonna happen. If the government starts laying people off as a late indicator, you know you're coming to the end of a cycle. So let me ask you a question. This is historically true. Is government laying people off? And if the answer is yes, then the likelihood is we are end cycle. Government typically bloats. In every cycle, in every bubble that we've seen that has to do with government involvement, because markets are supply and demand and this other manipulative fucking thing called government, in any cycle where we've seen government involved and it's been an actor in the cycle, government has bloated as the cycle has expanded. When the government starts shrinking and the cycle reboots itself, that's when everything else gets good. Now, if you're in a need-based business, like you sell food, you sell groceries, you sell this, you sell that, as long as you can like balance to what, I mean, those are technically low margin businesses if you're in like the food and grocery business, but as long as you can balance to inflation and maintain that margin spread, you're gonna be good always because you're in the need-based business. But if you're in the, let's call it the greed business, which is any type of luxury product, this is your time that's coming. So what does that mean? Now is your last 6 months to a year to get very, very, very efficient. Now, when I say efficient, am I talking about doing the cuts that Wall Street's doing? No, I don't think that that's necessarily the right way. Like, should you cut people? Yes, if you don't need them, cut them. But if you don't need them, the first cut you should be really thinking about is your own ego, because you should have never hired them in the first place. What you should be cutting is waste. And waste in a business is processes that don't serve, okay? Systems that don't serve. You know, do you have a little entry area in your office and you have like 30 magazine subscriptions that are wasting your company's money that you bought when you were riding on a high? Get rid of them. It's not serving the mission and the client and the main thing of the business. So right now, you see the big business is getting efficient. It's now your time to get efficient. Why get efficient? Because once you're lean, you're going to see additional capital rolling in, regardless of the industry, regardless of the market, and it's gonna be that time where you can take that and leverage it into growth in an expanding market. Now, in an expanding market, rising tides raise all ships. That's a win for everybody. Congratulations. But if you can win a little more than everybody else because you have a more efficient model, the ability to go faster, a little more dry powder, it's a home run, okay? You want to be able to grow and successfully like maintain during recessions, and you want to be able to profit and maintain during booms. So when you're in a boom, if you've gained market share, like one of my companies, Zia Homes, we've grown every year. Like it's been a shitty last few years for home builders. We've grown every single year because we've always focused on efficiency. It's literally the #1 thing in business. Now, when do most people focus on it? When it hurts. When should you focus on it? Always. But since most people are most people, when would now be a good time to start? Right now. Because what's coming? You have literally the next 6-8 months to be ready for what I think is the opening to a market, not just real estate, that'll be early indicator, but it'll also be stocks. I do not think you're gonna have good opportunities with bonds. I think those are gonna continue riding down. I think as interest rates go down, you know, bond payouts are gonna go down. And then I think bonds are also getting devalued a little bit by gold. A lot of investment advisors that I know are actually replacing a lot of their gold or bonds with gold. You know, gold has stalled in the last few months, but if you were listening to my lives a few months ago and you bought gold, then you got a significant rise. I mean, it went up, what, 10, 20%? I mean, it was fantastic in 30 days, you know? And it's stalled right now, but what are all the governments on earth doing? Are they balancing their budgets? No, they're gonna continue printing. Do they have reserve currencies that are based on assets? No, they're all fictional. They're all based on the value of their economy or some arbitrary thing that politicians can fudge. And if there's one thing politicians do, they lie. So what does that mean for any real hard asset, whether it's housing, gold, real estate of any kind, precious metals, you know, businesses, I feel are they're kind of a currency asset, but hard asset as well. So anyway, I would be looking at right now, how do I get efficient? How do I make sure that my investments are not in anything that could bubble out? And where are there bubbles? Valuation bubbles. Everything's too high in the stock market. Let's talk about why everything's high in the stock market, and we'll take questions if anybody has them. And this goes back to the Fed. That's why I said the Federal Reserve is the most powerful entity in America, more powerful than the executive branch. We have a global economy. Okay, there's trade. Everybody in the world trades with everybody else, right? So in a global economy where everybody's trading with everybody else, do you have millionaires in pretty much every country on earth? And the answer is yes. Do you have billionaires in every country on earth? Yeah, most of them. So what are those people doing with their money? Well, if in their country they have a low interest rate environment, they're going to arbitrage. Your government arbitrages. They borrow money to enact policy. Businesses arbitrage. They borrow money to expand and grow. You arbitrage. You borrow money to buy a house you can't afford. If you could have afforded it, you wouldn't have gotten a mortgage. Arbitrage is the way that life works. I know some idiots still go listen to the Dave Ramsey policies of pay everything off and be cash free, but the real metric for successful entrepreneurs is this. Like, you want to have a debt proposition that is kind of equal to your balance sheet. So if you're worth 100 grand, you should probably also owe 100 grand. And that way, if you're worth 100 grand and you borrow 100 grand, now you have 200 grand to reinvest so that you can become worth 200 or 300, because you've proven that you can use money to make money. If you can make a 20% return in your business, but you can borrow from a bank at 6, well, then you're making 20% on your balance sheet equity and you're making 14 on the banks. I mean, that's 34% on your debt. That's not terrible. So arbitrage is kind of the way that the country has moved. That's happened ever since the gold was removed from the dollar back in the 1970s by Nixon. And arbitrage is going to be the way things are. Do you have a question over there, Dom?
Oh, yeah, there was one from Instagram.
No, let me chime in and see what I can't answer.
Advising policymakers, what changes will you recommend to reduce inflation without triggering a recession?
Reducing inflation, which I'm actually glad that's a really good question. If you get questions, let me know. Everything about inflation, if you want to bring down costs, you have to increase supply. Okay, like the fundamentals in economics are supply and demand. Okay, right now there is demand, but there's an affordability issue. Okay, so if people can afford something, they're not going to buy it. Well, what's the way to make things cheaper? Well, if there's only a few actors out there doing a thing, it's going to be more expensive because a few actors can't serve everyone. You want more actors producing that product or service. If there's 2 builders building in an area, then the only person they have to compete with on price is each other. Okay? If there's 40 builders building in an area, then all of a sudden you've got how many people that they have to compete on price with. So you're gonna create this market. You're gonna create this, okay, well, we have the guys that are sort of affordable, and then you have the guys that are high end, and you might kind of categorize them differently, but because there are many people producing a product, that product it becomes something that customers now have choice in. Once customers have more choice and they can negotiate with more different parties, when one customer drives down one of those parties, 39 others have to listen or not sell their products, right? So markets are healthier and inflation goes down when there is more supply brought into the market. So we need to focus. If I was advising policymakers, I would talk about how do we make it more affordable to build a home. And look, you're not gonna go change the cost of living to the plumber. You're not gonna go change the cost of living to an electrician. What I would do is I would say, hey, you know what? Let's go find out who is doing construction loans, and let's have not gifts, not bailouts, not money coming out of the federal government that's never coming back, but money at a low interest rate for builders to produce products, okay? And they can go through the same way that they did their PPP loan and their ERC stuff. Like, that was loans, guys. They were loans that were forgiven in many cases, but not all. And they were given out by lenders. They went through the banks to do this. Like, the government works really well with the banks. So if you went to the banks that were already doing construction loans and you said, hey, you know what? We're gonna come up with whatever, 50 billion or 100 billion or 200 billion or whatever was gonna meet the need to help increase market supply by 20% in every market that had gone up, over the last 12 months. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take that demand and supply that might have been in some certain equilibrium in that market, and you're gonna expand the supply, which is going to force everybody to become a little more competitive, okay? Are you going to go get the plumber to get cheaper? I mean, maybe if you're overpaying, but in most cases, the way that you're going to lower the cost is by increasing the supply. It's called supply side economics. And right now, when you have an affordability issue, if you bring on more supply, the price comes down. Look what happened with oil from, say, January 1 to just about a month ago. It went from what, like, I think it was over $100 a barrel to, it came down to $60 a barrel? Why? Because more oil was produced by more countries. You know, Trump had a better relationship with the Saudis. There was more ability to influence them, so oil came down. When oil came down, inflation came down, guys. Like inflation is very tied to energy. This is one of those kind of, you know, anytime let me re-answer the question again. If I was advising policymakers, and we could do a whole fucking lab on this, you know, one of the things I would probably look at with them is have a plan, not a catchphrase. Like whenever I'm listening to politicians, it's so funny to me because they'll go say something like, you know, eat the rich or tax the rich or this guy's bad or this guy's bad or you should hate them or oh, go hate them. How does that fucking work? Like, I'm glad you're telling me to hate someone, but it reminds me of this meme, okay? Like there was this king and this queen and they were standing on a castle and there were the people with the torches and the people with the pitchforks and they're all rioting below the castle and they're like, oh, we're so angry. And the queen's like, what are we gonna do? We're all gonna die. And the king says, nah, don't worry. All we gotta do is make the people with the pitchforks hate the people with the torches. Once we can divide them up and make them hate each other, that'll work. And so what you should look for in a politician, and you know, unfortunately you can't advise policymakers because they're entitled. They've figured out in the social media generation that most people are too stupid, unfortunately, and maybe stupid's not the word, but ignorant and overwhelmed by content. They've figured out that they don't have to come up with a plan. Like if everybody that was watching TikTok could watch videos for more than 30 fucking seconds, they might actually listen to what their politicians say and they might actually vote better. Like think about that. Like, so it's not necessarily advising the policymakers. You kind of have to advise the voters and the voters aren't going to pay attention until they're in massive pain. Like, you know, Trump got record Democratic votes. And the Democrats are really pissed about this, but Trump got record Democratic votes. Like independents voted for Trump, Republicans voted for Trump, a lot of Democrats voted for Trump. That's how he got as many voters as he got to win the election he just won. Now, do you think that Democrats wanted to vote for Trump? No, they were just in pain because Biden's administration did a very bad job. So whether you love Trump or hate Trump, Biden did a bad job and that created a reaction. It's cause and effect. And so what I would advise policymakers to do is like give the whole plan, not just, you know, let's hate those guys. And now what I would advise the people that are, you know, living under their policymakers to do is ask for the plan. Like if you can't get a plan where you can explain it, like an interesting one is the Mandani guy in New York. Like as a democratic socialist, he wants to just raise taxes, run against Trump, run against Trump, run against Trump. Like I don't see that. Like I don't see that as a real plan because like the New Yorks and Californias of America are already highly taxed and we've already seen an exodus of people leaving, voting with their money from the New Yorks and Californias. So taxing them more doesn't just get people to stay. Like, and he's not talking about taxing everyone. He's talking about only taxing the people who have the means to leave. Like if you can't offer more, like, okay, so you're New York, you're colder. Okay, you have beaches, but Florida's beaches are nicer. Okay, well, your real estate's more expensive than Florida's. Florida has no income tax. Like what stops people from going to Florida? Like, right? Like, so, I mean, you have to have a plan that works. I mean, talk about all the free busing, talk about all the free shit you're gonna give that you want, but like, unless you have a way of paying for it, I don't understand it. And so I'd advise the politicians, have a plan that you can explain, that people can understand, and I'd advise the constituents, you know, ask them to check on their plan. Anything else, Tom? No? All right, well guys, we're gonna chime off. I've gotta go and hit a coaching video. Wanted to chime in, let everybody know the government is shut down, guys. It will be open probably by tomorrow afternoon. You know, Congress is all, it looks like flying back today to do their part. I mean, I wish there could just be one thing to reopen it, but you know, the Senate already voted. It looks like it's a done deal. If Congress votes tomorrow, which it's highly likely they will, the government is reopened. You're gonna see extreme pent-up demand. Get efficient, ride the ride, go through the slow season. I think once we start seeing tax returns coming in next year, you're gonna see a boom. So you're gonna see a kind of a steady uptick starting in March. Going from May to September, you're gonna see what I think will be a boom. It's just win-win-win, guys. Any entrepreneur right now, get efficient, you got a few more months of grind. Now, if you're a politician, thanks a lot, fuck you.